Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Art of Dubbing, another podcast. This time, I'm in Cape Town, South Africa, for the MIP Africa. It was an amazing experience. So we are going to start, and I'm going to ask my two colleagues for this podcast to introduce themselves. So we have Blage from Transperfect, and we have Andrea from Voiced. So Blage, can you tell us a little bit who you are, what you do at Transperfect, and we'll continue with Andrea.
Sure. Thank you, Jacques, for having me, and welcome everyone. I'm Boage. I work for Transperfect since last year, but I have been in the gaming industry for the last 17 years. I've been overlooking QA, player support, localization, voice-over dubbing, and few other services related to gaming. And right now at Transperfect, I'm overseeing the gaming division. I'm based here in Barcelona.
Great, and it's good because we are going to talk about gaming today, so that's perfect. And
I'm in
Andrea
the right spot. Thank you.
is in the dark today, so no worries, Andrea. As long as we can hear you,
Thank
uh,
you.
you are fine, and you are live from Milano, Italia. So go
E-
ahead.
Exactly, live from Milano. Sorry for the camera, but things happens, and it's happening now. Okay, after 4 years working perfectly, camera decided to go on strike. So happy to be here today, and had a good day to everybody. I'm Andrea Bellista. I've been working in the game localization industry from 1994 to be a founder as an old company called Binari Sonori. I've been taking care of game localization from the really beginning, from BBS to the internet age, okay, and then join, say, another global group, and then now from 2020, starting a new activity with Voiced, so that taking care of game localization and AI.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you, Andrea. And I'm Jacques Barrault, your host for tonight. I'm Vice President Media and Interactive Entertainment at TransPerfect, and I'm dealing with all the issues regarding creative, casting, dubbing, voices, etc., etc. So great to have you guys. Thank you very much for joining. Um, before we start really talking about the gaming, Andrea, I would like you to show us a little bit where is the market now. I saw you have beautiful slides about the state of the market, and
Yeah.
I think it will be interesting for everybody. So, in terms of volume, in terms of languages, and in terms of audio game versus written game, if you want, or unvoiced versus voiced games. So can show us
Yeah.
something.
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. Since definitely is something that is has been changing very quickly, and let's go and to see how can you see the
Yes,
screen?
it's something. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Audio,
So
security.
so
Go
thank
ahead.
you. So, just a brief description of the gaming market that we are now. We have seen it very changing a lot from the recent years, and we are talking about an end user market about 200 billion. Okay, and with a huge amount of players, with a huge geography, since there are more than 3 billion players worldwide, and they're constantly growing, and the span of the platform is also increasing from console, browser game, PC, mobile, and whatever, and with different shape between Asia, America, and Europe, but definitely growing, very different target group. We see that also from Newzoo, so the market is growing at 5% or until 2026, and this is, we are talking about very large market. To trying to get to the point, we can focus on 2022, in which basically on Steam there have been 13,000 games launched, so a huge amount, but just 151 multi-platform new games released in Europe in 2022. Okay, the great thing is that we can notice is that just 41 games with audio lock in Europe language other than English has been released. So we see that a huge amount of game released, okay, not so many multi-platform, and most of them in text only, very few of them, okay, with the voice localization. This means
So
that you have big IPs, okay, that are
yeah,
grouping everything. Yeah,
so this is really interesting, and I let's see what Blaget has to say about that. If he's uh,
yeah.
if he's confirming these numbers based on what we do at TransPerfect. Blaget, you can leave the slide
Okay,
on
thank
the
you.
screen down there. So Blaget, what's your take on that? Can you are you agreeing with these numbers that you have less and less audio localization to do with the games?
I would say that probably the number of titles that include localized voiceover audio is increasing overall if you look at just raw numbers. But if you look at the percentage of how many games are releasing every single day on Steam,
Yeah,
only very handful of those include any audio whatsoever,
yeah.
not even mentioning localized voiceover. I think that the barrier of entry for the gaming industry has been lowered so much over the last 10, 15, 20 years. There are thousands of games being published on Steam and other platforms every single day.
So
Most of them,
yeah, go ahead, finish. Sorry.
I just wanted to say that most of them don't include any voiceover audio whatsoever. However,
Exactly.
there are
Yeah.
still a few very, very large games, very large AAA titles that do include thousands or hundreds of thousands of voiceovers lines. So while generally speaking, the percentage of those games that include voiceover audio is not that big, the amount of work that we're seeing in the industry is increasing, and that's applicable to all portions of game development, including recording voiceover audio.
This is very interesting. I mean, when I think that when I was at Warner Brother doing the dubbing for the games, and Andrea can relate because Andrea and I go a long way. Um, the first game that my group handled at Warner was Batman Arkham Asylum, and I remember this was 250,000 lines, so which is much bigger than any movie you can dub. So that was a huge game, and I'm really wondering if uh, if it's because of the price. I mean, we know that uh, these games have a lot of lines, so it costs a lot of money to dub.
Yeah,
It the games I did the games for Harry Potter, the games for the Looney Tune, with some Batman games, and obviously these games are huge, and so it's like you dub a 3 movie or 4 movie at a time. It's huge. Now we see a huge reduction in the game localization. Is it because it's expensive, or is it because you have so many new platforms that people, they play with their telephones, and they do gaming on the phone. And of course, if you do gaming on the phone, the audio is not really, doesn't appeal very much. The picture is already small. So is it because of the new platform? Is it because it's expensive, or is it just a trend? Well, Andrea, what's your take on that?
yeah. I mean, first of all, I agree with Blanger that basically not all the games has voiceover. Many games have no narrative, let's say, component. At the same time, there's a diversification in platform. Mobile is going up very strongly, and there's not so much need to have audio on mobile, even if the narrative
Correct.
component also on mobile is increasing. But basically, what we're seeing is that you have few big IPs,
Yeah.
okay, and the audio budget and the return of investment is concentrated on these games. I remember 10 years, 15 years ago, the games were smaller, more IPs, and it was more easy, okay, to have access on, to have audio on more IPs that were smaller. So basically, everything is concentrating. The volumes is still big and is getting bigger, but few games, big lines, and of course, the minor languages, let's say, or not so big languages are shrinking, and it's not easy to localize also with voice in that locality. Yeah.
So let's talk about that 1 minute because I saw one of your slides also talking about languages. So you just talk about the languages. Now we have an idea about the state of the market. Do you have something to say about the languages? Which are the languages where they play more, and which are the
Mhm.
languages where they dub more? Because
Yeah.
that would be interesting to see if you can
Yeah,
show us with
I mean,
slide.
let me see. Okay, roughly, okay, we see that there's the big concentration on French. Then you have Spanish and German. Then you have Italian and other languages. So it means that in few market you have many IPs. Okay, and also in other languages are more, let's say, predominantly, let's say, text translation, and not so many, let's say, voice localized. Yeah.
This is really. I'm very surprised to be really honest with you. I didn't think the French would be
Yeah, a lot of
more
French,
than
Jacques.
the Japanese.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. And I know I knew that Mexico, and we did a lot of games in Mexico. I know I remember Mexico was a huge place for games,
Yeah.
and it's not big anymore. So these numbers, based on our history and our age in this business, are these numbers really new? When did these changes happened? Is it like 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Because the French didn't dub so many games 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the French is in a way the bigger chunk of the recording. At the same time, the other languages are coping, but we see that anyway, as we say, few games, bigger games, it's difficult to, let's say, activate the voice localization. Most of it are basically translated, just translated. Yes.
That's fantastic, and then very, very surprising to me, but very interesting. So, where do you guys think? And Blage, you can start with this one. Where do you think the market is going now? Is it going to be the same trend based on the last 2 years? Where are we? Where are we going mainly?
Yes, I probably wasn't expecting to see that large portion of being represented by French in the slide that we're just looking a second ago. But on the other hand, I'm not too surprised to think that that primarily French, Spanish, and German are the languages that drive most of the voiceover localization. If you look at how much the games have changed over the last 10 years, if you're looking at how games are becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, they're so more complex to develop. And if you look at localizing voiceover audio, yes, you are adding significant cost to your development budget, but also you're adding a lot to your critical path of releasing the product to the market. If we're
So
talking
you
about those,
sorry to interrupt. So you are saying that cost is an issue in the audio log.
I think there are two biggest drivers. So cost is definitely one, and the other one is that if you are going with localization for voiceover, it means that you need to add enough time to handle that. And as we know, games development cycle is always stretched to the maximum. And if you add additional localization for voiceover as an additional step in this critical path, it means that you're impacting your release dates. And everyone wants to release as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Game developers and publishers don't want to delay the releases. It's been a trend recently that games are slipping to next year, slipping to next quarter, slipping to next month. And by adding localization for voiceover, I think a lot of people are concerned that it can not only add to cost, but it can only add complexity and potentially impact their time to release.
Sure,
Yeah,
that's a very good point
yeah,
because now that we established that, let's talk a little bit about for the auditors that don't know uh, how you localize game because the big issue with localizing game is you don't have a picture to dub against besides the little part of the cinematics but the cinematics represent what in a game 10% maybe 15% something like that so so it's really a minimum compared to the complete game. So why is it so long to dub a game knowing that you don't have a screen? Andrea, you want to take this one? You did a lot at the beginning.
yeah. I mean, I would like to restart from what Blase was saying and say yes, the speed and the game as a service has been really changing the scenario. Since games are fewer and are continuously updating assets, this means that you need to be fast and fast and fast. And audio is basically go through a different speed. But yeah, definitely to dub something without the video is complicated. And most of the time, the process is starting well before the cinematics are ready. So you need to dub with the audio file.
Yeah,
Sometimes audio files are already in a sequence, sometimes are single stems. And then, say, the developer need to put them together, and you need to do what we usually call sound sync without seeing the face, but just hearing the sound.
yeah,
So we are basically developing and recording along the development in multiple batches with changes and changes and changes since the game developers are balancing the game and things are not final until the very end. And when the very end is coming, yeah, you need to be super fast. Yeah.
yeah. And I remember a lot of games we were doing. You have a line saying, "Hey, be careful, it's coming." So,
Yes.
what is it? Is it a car? Is it a plane? Is it an animal? Is it a
Yeah.
fish? Is it a lion? You have no idea.
Yes.
So, you have a lot of lines where you have to go back to the developer and say, "Can you tell me what's going on here and there?" And for sure, when you don't see what you are dubbing, it takes a lot of time. Um and so, continuing with this idea, um, I just wanted to ask before we go to new solutions, because we are here to state what's going on, but also try to propose some solution for our friends listening. Um, is it still is there still a big separation between the vendors, the game studios doing only games and the game studios doing also dubbing, meaning that when I started in this business in early 2000, meaning like 20 years ago, you had the studio doing only games and the studio doing only dubbing for film. And it was a big challenge when I did Arkham Asylum, and I really convinced, because it was such a huge game for Warner, and Batman was a huge IP for Warner. So the concept was to really use the same studios that did the theatrical to have the same experience, same voices, same glossaries,
Yeah.
everything really basically following the movie. Um, but are we still seeing a separation between the game vendor and the dubbing vendors? Blage, you want to start with that, and after we'll have Andrea.
Yes, I think that's still the most commonly seen model. That also ties with what you said earlier, that context is king when it comes to translating and localizing and recording localized voiceover. Without the context, it's very difficult to record some lines if you don't know the wider context of the game. Uh, that's also one of the reasons why we're seeing so many issues with some of the translations or some of the voiceovers that we're seeing sometimes in games are completely out of the context. We can notice that something was translated or localized without knowing what it's actually referring to. That's why we
Sure.
see some silly translations every once in a while. Uh, by the
And
fact
that's
that there are
also,
multiple,
sorry to interrupt, Blaže. Is it also for this reason that you have a lot of QA in games, or QI, to make sure that everything is correct and you don't have a huge mistakes in the translation? The QA is more a functional QC, but is it for this reason?
yes, exactly. With multiple vendors only focusing on their specific bits and pieces during the process. So one vendor is doing the text localization, the other vendor is doing recordings, and the third vendor is doing QA. It means that there's no cross pollination and no sharing of the knowledge that is already existing within one of the teams or the other. Uh,
Correct.
Yeah.
that is something that can be simplified by making sure that you have the same team talking to the same uh, key players in different parts of the localization life cycle. So when
Yes.
translators are translating the text, they don't know the context. The same applies to voiceover actors. Even the best actor cannot record properly voiceover if they don't know if they don't understand the full picture. The same
Yeah.
with linguists. They are not able to translate, even if they're the best translators in the world. They can always make mistakes because of lack of the context. It's only when the testers actually launch the game, they put it on their PC or their console, they can actually see what's happening there and check if everything is relevant. But
Yeah.
if you combine multiple services within one team with one outsourcing team, it cuts down the time of communication and query management and going back and forth to developers or publishers asking the same questions over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I was at Warner doing the games, we had a dedicated person uh, getting all the questions from the different vendors. And so we had one person going back to the producer
Just doing
and
that.
asking all the questions, and Andrea did probably did the same thing. So I was getting all the question and to try to limit the communication, which can be heavy. Uh, Great.
Yeah.
So we are at 22 minutes, so practically half of it. Let's talk about the future. Okay. So we had half of the podcast about the past. Let's talk about the future now. And Andrea has a lot of solutions to present, including AI. So we are not going to explain that AI is going to save the industry because it's not true. But your approach is very interesting, and yesterday I was speaking at the MIP Africa, and I had a few slides on AI, and it was very interesting to see the reaction of the people. We had a Q&A session, and people are a little bit worried about it. We talk about
Yeah.
the legality and the regulation of AI. So I would start stating that everything we would do with AI is completely legal.
Oh
we
yeah.
we respect the likeness of the actors, which is rule number one. And as an introduction, I would like to say that the European Union is going to put in effect the AI Act in 2025. And this AI Act is going to oblige the vendor that are using AI to give the name of the actors that were used to divulge the data, if you want. So
Okay.
nobody will be able to just start getting voices anywhere and using them. So
Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool, and it's a good measure. The Americans are following on this kind of regulation. So I think the entire world is getting aware of that. So Andrea, let's talk about your company, Voiced, and
Yeah.
after we'll talk about our proprietary software at TransPerfect, which is Studio Next. And so for everybody, you will have two good aspects of how to do localization for games in audio. Obviously, go ahead, Andrea.
Yeah. So thank you, Jacques. First of all, I would like to underline that there's a lot of confusion going on with AI, and we need regulation. We need to have, let's say, ethical AI, since this can create new opportunities rather than, let's say, create problems. Of course, this has to be done through the legislators, and we are following all the rules that are getting into the market. But talking about the technical aspect, I would like to underline that for doing games dubbing and AI for games dubbing, we need to have a special training. We need to have a system that is able to talk with multiple voices, with multiple styles in multiple languages. Okay, and it's basically the system that we're building that is driven by generative AI, in which we can accept prompt and reference of, let's say, assets, and then generate new voices, new synthetic voices, and of course, trying to use all the emotion and all the other text translation into the other languages. So the usual AI is not working for games dubbing. You need to have a specific training for games dubbing, and you need to have specific tool, since it has to be able to do multiple voices with multiple emotions in multiple languages. And
So,
usually AI system do VO dubbing only. Yeah.
Andrea, let's talk about that. And Blaže, you can jump in if you want. Uh, what is your take on which kind of emotions do you
Mhm.
mainly find in games versus which kind of emotion you find in a thriller, in an action movie, in whatever? I mean, is it so different? I understand that games can have a lot of can be a lot of different genres. Like
Mhm.
in movies, you have comedies and dramas and war movies. What's the general feeling when you play games? For me, years ago when I was doing localization for game, it was a lot of games with a lot of action, war,
Mhm.
etc. Is it changing now, or is it still? Or how many kind of
Mhm.
genres do you have in the games?
Well, I mean, this is a tough question, since basically this is evolving very quickly. But definitely, action game and the games are interactive. So basically, the voices you hear is that you are a part of the game. And in this respect, you need to meet multiple branches of the stories, thing that
Yeah.
you do not have in the movie. So in the movie, you have much more space for narrating something to an audience that is just watching it. Okay, so you can paint the emotion and the characterization of the specific, say, characters much more deeply. And By for the game, yes, the moment in which there's the prevalent, the predominant part is acting is at the cutscene or some specific moment in which something is revealed to the users. Okay, for the rest is a lot of exploration through the levels, a lot of maybe engaging with enemies and battles and whatever. So the type of emotion are, say, kind of a different. Okay, and there's much more, say, engagement sound and call outs and shouting sentences in the games, while they're not so much in the movies, in which the narrative component is prevailing. Yeah.
Very interesting. Blaže, what's your take on that, giving your experience with all the games you are doing for TransPerfect?
I like what you said, Andrea. I think that was very spot on how you described what's the main difference between games and movies. I'm a huge fan of games that allow me to influence the story, to allow me to make the choices throughout the progression of the game that will impact how the game will finish. What's the ending? which paths, which conversations, which decisions will unlock based on my previous actions. Uh, because that's the part that helps us gamers to bond better with our characters.
Yeah,
When you see a movie, there's a story that was developed. Of course, there's always going to be some room for interpretation from the audience, but there's a story that director included in the game in the movie. Sorry.
Yeah,
While in the game, it's up to you how you want to finish. Do you want to be a good character or a bad character? Do you want to go ahead and kill everyone, or you do want to be a friend with everybody? And
yeah,
your decisions will impact the ending, will change the world, will change how the war or the conflict will finish based on your actions.
yeah,
So I think that's a very important part to
yeah,
remember in gaming, that
yeah,
games are far more interactive than any TV shows or movies.
of course.
yeah.
So are you
Um,
saying that if you, let's say, if one of your options, because you have a lot of options, that's why you have so many lines to dub in the games, even if the game is not as long as or same length as a movie, when you play it, you have so many options that in fact you have like four times more lines. Uh, so are you saying that if I want to choose to fight with somebody, the line needs to be pretty assertive and aggressive, and if I want to go in a peace zone with some friendly people, the lines are going to
mm,
be much softer, etc.? So that's what you are saying.
Maybe you want to talk your way out of the fight. Maybe you want to confront your opponent. Maybe you want to ask somebody for help and just run away. Uh,
yeah,
and when you're recording those lines, you need to account for that. Because again, in the movie, there's one story, there's one solution of the conflict that you're seeing.
Sure,
And
sure.
while you're recording voiceover, you need to remember about how your acting needs to change in all the variants of
Yeah.
the same scene you're just recording.
yeah,
Very interesting. So, Andrea, tell us a little bit how you deal with the emotions, because you
yeah,
know, in in the AI world, what right now the emotion are the next challenge. You know,
yeah,
because you can morph, you can do TTS, but the text to speech when you generate audio is pretty flat most of the time. It's da da da
yeah,
da 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 da.
yeah.
So how do you deal with the emotion in your systems?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been the first challenge, Jacques, and definitely we need to create. We need to let's say have a reference of an emotional model, and of course we have been picking up an behavioral emotional model. So that is basically the one that is while people are interacting. So if you are aggressive, the other hand has fear. Okay, so and this kind of behavioral exploration of the emotion is starting, say, from real experience, from say psychological studies and whatever. So we have been trying to represent the emotion and how the emotion are expressed by different cultures and humans. So we've been creating a specific data set that is able to paint all these kind of things, so that for every language, okay, we have been collecting emotion and expression and try to correlate them. So we are basically creating an engine that behind the technology is working and capturing the emotion at the source and transferring the emotion to the target, knowing that the same emotion can produce different expression according to different cultures. So there's a lot of, say, studies behind that. And of course, we need to put this in a tool in the future, and we are building this, and we are, say, trying to explore how the technology can be used at a higher level. Yeah.
So that's very interesting because I always say when I do conferences, you don't dub to a language, you dub to a culture, obviously,
Yeah.
and we all agree with that. So you are saying that obviously the emotions, you know, if you hear the first time I've been to Japan to do one of
Yeah.
the big Warner movies, it was really intimidating for me because the people were saying hello, saying "Ohayo gozaimasu," and I was saying, "Whoa, are these people
Yes.
upset with me?" And that's just the way they talk. So they just say
Yes.
hello, and you have this inflection that
Yeah.
is not at all like in our European way of speaking.
Yes.
So you are also adapting the emotion to the language and culture, if I understand.
Yes, basically, one thing is an emotion that is typical of Homo sapiens. The other thing is how you express it. The
Yeah,
expression of the emotion through the voice is different. Okay, and this is detected, okay, through say AI, and we are trying to create a system that can say represent it, okay, in different languages, capturing emotion in one culture and representing this into another, not
yeah.
just say
So
translating
now
it, let's say.
So now I have a trick question for you. I just think
Wow.
about that. You were saying human Homo sapiens emotion. So in games you have monsters. Okay,
Yeah.
you have so.
Mhm.
How do you deal
Yeah,
with the
aliens.
emotion of a monster that is not human?
Absolutely. So one things are the basic emotion, but the way to represent them is very different. Also, there's something that is stylish. So we have a kind of iconic representation of the bad guy, of the good guy, of the fear, of the love. Okay, so we need to match the emotion with the expression, letting the expression cover much more shape of what the simple emotion can describe. Since
Sure.
this is acting, okay,
Yeah, of
and
course.
this is definitely a big step to feel from emotion to expression. Absolutely, yeah.
So very interesting. Blage, do you have a lot of monster in the games you are doing at Just Perfect?
Absolutely. All different shapes and forms of monsters, creatures out of this world, out of the space, from different galaxies. Yes.
So
Still,
that's fantastic. That's a great gig for the casting.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
guys who are doing casting, they probably love that. This is great. I would like to. I would like before we go to the Studio Next software. I would like to state that Andrea is so founded his company called Voiceed, so Voiseed.
EED. Yeah.
And what is your website, Andrea, so people can check what you are doing?
Yes, basically is www.voiseed.com. So you can get
Okay.
there, take a look. And of course, this is our journey. And since we're talking about monster and creative voices, we need to do the voice design, not the
Yeah,
sound design. Voice design is something that every sound engineer is doing. And definitely, okay, this is the aim of virtual voice virtualization that we're going. It's a path, it's a journey. We're still not
yeah.
there, but that's a nice discovery. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would like to invite people to go and check voiceseed.com because it's pretty cool platform. Blage and I know the platform. It's very interesting to see, and that's one way of doing audio localization. So thanks for that, Andrea. So
Thank you
now
so much.
I would like to talk 2 minutes about a tool that was developed by TransPerfect called Studio Next, and I'm going to this time share my screen with you guys, and and let me find the screen. Here it is. Um, so, are you guys seeing my screen?
we can. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. So, this is a recording platform. Uh, the concept for the audio gamers, besides the fact that it's a remote recording platform, so you can record a little bit everywhere, it's a cloud-based system, so you don't have anything in your computer. You are streaming the content, which for security is good. So besides the fact, these two facts that I just told you, the interesting fact for the games is that you have, as you can see here, the beginning of the sentence and the end of the sentence, the beginning and the end. And if I change the window here, you can see the markers that really show you the beginning and the end of the sentence. And maybe Blager, you can explain that in 2 minutes. What is what is the time constraint in game, really in 2 minutes, so people will understand what we are going to talk about.
Sure. So when you are recording voiceover audio for a game, it's very crucial that we make sure that the recording we produce in the language that is the target language is not too long. It's not too short. Sometimes maybe we need to also sync the recording with the lips movement of the character on the screen. If there's a dialogue, you need to make sure that it really looks as a dialogue in all languages, and not that the individual sentences are overlapping each other. So when there's a dialogue, you need to make sure that the first character finishes before the other can start. So that's why it's
Okay.
important when we're recording the game that there's a certain limit. A certain sentence can last for 1 second, 5 seconds, or 15 seconds.
Correct. And so this is, like Blager explained very well, this is super important, and that's why you will always have a QA in games to verify if the games is playing well, to verify if the a sentence that is too long is not going to block everything. So this is why we think that Studio Next, which is a software that we released a few years ago, is really perfect for games, because as you can see here, and I'm going to play just 30 seconds of it, so you will see, you will hear the audio, the original audio, and this is just a translation, so don't pay attention to that. Just look at the big letters in blue.
Yeah, let's see what we got here. It says something here. Yeah. All Adam's lamp.
So, well, you guys understand the concept. The concept is that you have a beginning and an end. And if the translation follows the original, you cannot really go out of your time constraints, because you know where the beginning is, you know where the end is, and you just have to follow. So, obviously, I think personally that this is reducing a lot the mistake in time constraint that you could do at the recording. Um, and so that's why we love this software, which is a Transperfect made software that we are using a lot for dubbing, but I think it's perfect for games. Andrea, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is helping a lot to try to synchronize the text with the execution and the time. Since, of course, doing the dubbing and doing the production with audio mean introducing the time in the text. And this is basically a game changer. So, the more control you have over time constraints, especially for dubbing, since the
Yeah,
source is setting the stage for the target, and especially if you have pictures and moving pictures, that's extremely helpful. Yeah.
yeah. And even if you don't have a picture, by the way, you don't need
Yeah,
to have a picture, because you can use Studio Next without a picture, without a blank screen, and
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
the translation will be with time in, time out, and you can do all your lines like that. So
yeah,
it doesn't matter if you have or not a picture. Of course, for the cinematics is ideal,
yes.
because it's basically like lip sync dubbing, but it works for the rest. So great, we are approaching the end of this podcast. Um, so, any final remarks, Blager? What do you want to say in 1 minute about the future of games and and the future of games for Trust Perfect?
I think we're actually seeing, we're at the edge of a big change, I think, in the way how the games are being developed. And as they're going bigger, as the time to release is getting shorter and shorter, I think that AI is definitely going to be something that will impact the industry very soon. And maybe where we are right now is not already the start of new era of gaming, but probably in the next couple of years, it will definitely impact the way how we produce games, how we help with localization, voiceover, QA and other aspects of the gaming development. So I'm very excited to see what comes next, and definitely here's to the next exciting couple of years.
Super.
Yeah.
Andrea, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
mean, I think that I agree with Blaise that we are really in a very special moment, a transformation moment. But in this moment, we need to remember that our mission is to give to the player the best possible experience. And
Correct.
players, okay, are the one that are building the market, and we are a component, and we need to give to the player, say, more content, more better translation, multiple voices, and maybe voices also with languages that now are not covered. Okay, so voicing them, voicing for having more, let's say, engagement for all the users. That would be the most important thing, and in a super speed environment. Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
We have a question from Victor Alonso Lyon,
Yeah.
whom I know and I met a few years ago. Nice to hear from you, Victor. So, Victor would be interested in knowing a little more about how the text is prepared to be displayed in Studio Next. Can we share something? Of course, we can. And in 30 seconds, the text is just the first thing to do when you have the original script is, or the original lines for a game, is to time them, which is what you do anyway. So you would prepare a script and your translation, and you would convert this translation in TTML file, which is a file format like a TTL for Netflix or whichever format. So as long as you have a TTML with a time in and time out, you can import that very easily in Studio Next. We can talk about that later, Victor. You know where I am, and uh, and that's uh, and that's how Studio Next works. So it's pretty easy. I would state also that you can directly translate in Studio Next now. We released this feature not a long time ago. So you would have your Studio Next session like the one I showed you. You have the original content and you see the original content because it was already imported with time in, time out, because you would time that obviously, and you can write your translation directly in Studio Next. And after you can record. So this is even better because you stay from the adaptation or the translation to the recording in the same platform. Thank you for the question and nice to hear from you. Guys, really thank you. I would like to finish with one little thought, talking about AI and based on the question that I got when I was speaking yesterday at the MIP Africa, I really think, like Blaže said, we are going to see a change in the industry, and probably some jobs are going to disappear, but probably other jobs are going to appear because 5 years ago nobody thought that being an influencer or being a YouTuber would bring some money, and now you have YouTuber millionaires. So this is a job that didn't exist 10 years ago. So the technology is always changing the landscape. You don't have any more people driving horse cars, but you have a taxi driver. So it's exactly the same concept. So let's stay positive, like Andrea and Blaže said, and we'll see what we'll do another podcast like that in a year to see where
Oh
we
yeah,
are. Uh, so
wonderful.
Andrea, thank you so much for joining. Blaže, thank you again.
Thank you
And
so much.
everybody, thank you very much for following. This was the Art of the Dubbing series. And I tell you, see you in 1 month for the next podcast. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you,
Sorry
Andrea.
for the
Thank you
camera.
all.
Hi, bye. Thank you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for
Bye.
the attention.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.